All right, I show it's 2 o'clock, so let's get started if we can. We'll come to order. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Austin, and Matt Champagne's out of town this week, so he asked me to lead the meeting, so we'll get started if we can. Everybody has an agenda in front of them. Are there any additions or deletions we need to make to that? Okay. If not, we'll go with what we have there. The previous minutes from the last meeting have been emailed to everybody. Do we have a motion to accept those? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Good there. Board member comments. Any of our board members have anything you want to share today? No? Okay. Tom Judson's also on vacation this week, so I guess coming down to management, Rick and John, I'll let you guys share what you have.
So like everyone else and all departments around the POA, we're still dealing with storm cleanup in one respect or another. We have things tidied up at the Tyree Landing, looking pretty good. Once they go through and mow, they'll grind up the smaller sticks and that kind of thing, so things will look better there. London Landing is also cleaned up. We did an initial walkthrough at Tanyard Creek and got what was in the way and what was dangerous, and then we'll circle back around and do some more cleanup later. The Department 480, our Lakes Ecology and Fisheries Department, we late last month, received some blue catfish. And we're raising those in our aquaculture ponds this fall. And by next February, we'll be able to stock those in the lakes. We purchased them at about 2 inches in length. And if things go as scheduled, they should be about 8 inches by next February. It'll save us some money by growing them ourselves and get them out in the lakes. We haven't had blue catfish stocked since 2014, so
Which lakes do you put
they'll go in the 3 larger lakes for sure: Lowman, Windsor, and Ann. And depending on what our survival is, we might be able to put some in Avalon.
Rick, do they spawn, or do we have?
They will, but survival is poor. So we have to help them out periodically by stocking. And they are they're a big fish, and they're one of the few fish that can consume some of the very largest gizzard shad that we have. Competition or predation by largemouth primarily on the young. They go through the motions, but most of them are consumed before they get large enough to be able to get away from predation.
The habitat's not real good for reproduction either.
Well, you need cavities and that kind of thing in the bank, but it's a predation issue more than anything.
And if it's successful, will you continue with it?
Yes. I don't know that we would do it every year. We want to kind of let a few years pass, most likely, and see what we're getting in our sampling before we do that again. But we'll do channel catfish either yearly or every other year for sure.
And the primary advantage of blue cat
Well, it's basically a size thing. So, you know, it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to catch a really big catfish. And so, you know, there are areas where they get over 100 pounds. Here, we've had them approaching 60 pounds. So,
What do they cost about when we buy them?
they were about 50 cents a piece,
Okay.
from what I understand. And we purchased 10,000 2-inch fish and received 13,000. We were given an extra 3,000.
No.
So.
Good.
And beyond that, do you have anything to add? We're prepared to talk about blue-green algae as Grace has asked us, but I don't know if we want to get through the rest of the agenda first, and we'll hit this at the end.
That's fine. Okay, nothing, John? Okay. All right. Under old business, I'm going to hit the second point first. We have proposed some projects for the 2020 budget, and we've had this out a couple of months. I don't know if anybody else has any additions or changes they want to make for that. If not, I guess we need a recommendation that we go ahead and submit this to the board.
I would like to add one thing to it. On Lake Brittany, the launch ramp dock is extremely high, and I would like to put in the budget, it wouldn't be very much money, to have a ladder put on there so that we could get in our boats a little bit easier. It's a little difficult right now. I have to actually use the ramp and just pull my boat back up on the ramp to get in.
Your boat's too big.
Sir?
Your boat's too big.
No, I don't think my 10-foot electric boat is too big.
Okay, we'll add that to it.
That's it.
Okay.
I would like to add that to it.
Would someone like to make a motion that we submit these then?
I make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, have it submitted then.
A question on this, Rick, there was an experiment done with treating the wood, the permaseal. How did it go?
I'm glad you asked. It did not go well, and I was in contact back in the spring with Permaseal, and they sent we had this spring we had a lot of rotten boards, and we were assured that the treatment had a 25-year warranty, and they were good about that, and came back in May, I believe, and replaced the boards that were rotten. They need about 3 or 4 months to cure, and they're coming back on the 23rd of this month to do a second treatment at no charge. So I'm not budgeting Permaseal anymore until I see the results of what they've done. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of rotten boards, on Lake Brittany, I was there yesterday doing the water sampling tests. And the furthest dock closest to the dam, I walked out there, that's where I usually do my testing, and there was a hole in it about 2 foot wide and about 1 foot deep.
Okay.
Where some of the boards were rotten, and I don't know, somebody stepped on it, or anyway, they broke
Okay.
through. So I mentioned this to John, so, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other item under old business, at the last meeting, we had a proposed regulation change presented that our legal counsel came up with. And I think we're still discussing this and considering it for the 2020 boating season. Tammy just brought me a couple of emails that were received that are, I guess, opposed to the regulation. One is from a resident on Lake Windsor and one on Lake Ann. and they're both fairly lengthy. They have 3 or 4 reasons they're opposed to them, and I'll pass these around. If you guys would like to read those, you can. I guess this regulation is probably why our audience is full today, so why don't we move on into the open forum? And if anyone wants to speak, we'll ask you to state your name and where you live, and try to limit your comments to about 5 minutes if you could. So, open forum?
I have one question.
I'm sure, yes, sorry.
I was down in Hot Springs Village a couple weeks ago, and I asked people about wakeboards down there, and I don't know if this is absolutely true, but they say they've banned them on the lakes.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody actually looked into that in doing all the research.
Hot Springs Village.
We'll look into that and see what their regulation is, so. Okay.
Hello, my name is Andy Grover. I live on 28A Bosworth Circle. It's on Lake Ann. Just to give you a little bit of context, I've lived here for 13 years. Me and my wife moved here without any kids. We now have 5. So we've had and we love Bella Vista. We've decided to raise our family here. About 5 or 6 years ago, we bought some property on Lake Ann, and we decided that's where we wanted to raise our family, with the intention of being able to have wholesome family activities that we could do together, with the intention of teenagers. I'm kind of dreading where we're going. Our oldest is 12 now, so we're trying to strategize and figure out the best way to successfully navigate teenagers. We built our house on Lake Ann. I'm going to build a dock this winter. Thank you for lowering the lake there so that I can get that done. We have a ski boat registered. It's an old Bayliner, which is just my starter boat that I've wanted to learn, get the kids familiar with it. We have 4 kayaks, 2 paddle boards, and a canoe, and we're out there every Saturday for several hours, and we're having a really good time. This was our 4th summer on the lake. A couple things that I wanted to talk about. First of all, I hear the concerns. I watched the video from the last meeting. I didn't realize I had heard all the wakeboard stuff that was going down, but I didn't know that you guys were getting serious to change anything that had happened from last year. So I wanted to make sure I came and shared my thoughts with you. I wanted to make sure I was clear that I'm not ignoring any of the concerns that people have with like dock repairs and stuff like that. But I just think that we need to consider a broader perspective. One of the big things is I had a hard time understanding how we got from a 200-foot distance to a 300-foot distance. It seems like all the industry regulations are 200 feet, and we're going above and beyond with a 300-foot, and that's concerning to me. That's one of the main reasons why I'm opposed. So please consider that. The other thing is I have a hard time figuring out how a small number of boats is the direct causation of all of this damage that's being complained about. There's a few number of them. I'm out there now tubing with my kids, and we create a ton of waves on the tube. That's intentional because I'm trying to throw them off, and that's what you do when you tube. So to see the difference, I can't see that the ban of these certain types of boats is going to directly relate to the damage being gone. And I think with that, there's some inherent cost with living on a lake that has wakes, which we all signed up for when we moved on these, that you have to consider that there will be maintenance. It's part of living on a lake. The other thing is when you do I looked up some of the things, and I know everybody can look anything up on the internet, so take that for whatever, but I tried to stick to good sources. A lot of them's the Water Sports Industry Association or something like that has the 200-foot regulations. Some of their studies, the one that I read says that wake surfing creates the bigger wake, not the standard wake of the other. That's the one that probably should be concerned about less than than wakeboarding. It says that it's that a wake surfing boat passing a section of shoreline every 9 minutes is less damaging than naturally occurring waves from a 10-mile-an-hour wind. So I think that that was backed up by a study that they did, and I think that's pretty clear that it would be kind of a far-fetched that we have a handful of boats causing all this damage. I think there needs to be, when you consider these rules, when I'm on Lake Ann every Saturday pretty much, I'm almost always the only boat out there. Rick, I don't think you've ever stopped me, but I've been stopped by other rangers, but I'm pretty much out there by myself, except for maybe 4th of July. And I believe I could easily comply to a 200-foot rule and maintain very safe, a safe environment, as well as I don't agree with the 300-foot, but I think I could even do a 300-foot except for the turns. So I could even do that. I would just ask you to please consider more perspectives than just the few that you've heard. I've tried to make sure we're getting the word out. It's a little bit hard to get people here at 2 in the afternoon on a work day, and so I think that's a very solid reason of why you haven't heard the other side of this. But I would just encourage you to look at the standards that the association has and follow those that have been backed up by some studies that they've done, as opposed to just somebody's opinion. So, do you have any questions, or? Thank you.
I have one, Andy. Do you live in the no wake area on the Lake Ann, or in the?
No, I'm on the main body.
Okay.
And I'm going to those concerns that people have when I build my dock. I'm going to talk to the architect and engineer to make sure that I could probably avoid hopefully some of those things, but I'm anticipating that there'll be maintenance with that.
So Sir, what type of boat do you have?
It's a 1990 Bayliner.
Okay.
So it's just an old ski boat, 22 feet, and right now it doesn't put a big wake out, but I plan on getting one as my kids get older. Tubing is kind of a younger kid sport. I don't do it. I'm too old for it because it hurts. And so I plan on, as my kids get older, to graduating them to more sports that they would be engaged in. If I took them tubing all through teenage years, I'm pretty sure they would go find something else to do on a Saturday.
So you can live with the 200 limit, you think, on Lake Ann?
I think so. I don't think, I mean, I know in Rick's meeting, in the meeting last year, Rick said he felt like that was okay, and I don't, I went on the GIS thing and measured it. It's like, I think it's like 800 feet across right at where my house is. Mm-hmm. And Ann is a pretty wide main body. It's not that long, but I mean, if there were like 3 boats there, it would probably get a little hairy, but there never is. And usually like on the 4th of July when there's been more boats, we usually just park ours and go back to our shore, and my kids play in the waves from all the other boats is what ends up happening. So
To clarify that rule, Andy, we currently have a 150-foot rule for boats operating at wakeboarding and wake surfing, and ski boats are still at 100 feet.
I didn't know that. I just stated 150 today. I mean, I respect everybody's, like, we need to be safe. I have my kids on there, so I'm probably safer than most of you probably even would, because I got a little bit of skin in the game with my kids. So we're staying far distance. When there's too many boats on the lake, we usually park it and just call it good, because tubing, when you get too many boats on the lake and everybody's doing donuts and spinning around and all that stuff, it's a lot of work for me to pay attention to where the other boats are, where my kids are, make sure I don't go over too big of a waveform, all that. So usually we park it at that point and just enjoy ourselves doing other activities.
So you're talking about a safety issue there.
Safety, yes.
Yeah, that's one of the mains we're really concerned about.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely into the safety and making sure that we can operate safely. I do think we're on a lake, so it's dangerous. You're not going to be able to bubble wrap it up and make it safe all together, but I think that there's areas that you can do to make it safe and work. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I was here 3 months ago, started talking about the wake problems. My name is Bill Ginger, spell that Ginger, 42 Dunkeld Drive, Lot 320, Loch Lomond. Got one question, and I appreciate all you board directors that volunteer your time. How many of y'all live on a wake or non-lake lake? Loch Lomond, for instance. Y'all live on Loch Lomond?
No, I live on Ann.
On Ann, okay. So it's where he came from. Do you happen to have a boat dock on the lake? Do you keep a boat in the boat dock? So we got one out of all of y'all, okay.
I don't live on the lake, but I rent a slip on Windsor.
Okay. I live on what I call, when I call the Lake Patrol, Tyree Raceway. Obvious reasons. Let me just say this. Everybody's intent is very good, but it's not accomplishing anything. Because I've heard this from a couple months ago when I was here, that we've been battling this all the time. Well, let's get it resolved. I went around to your bulletin boards on Loch Lomond, and you've got your little yellow pamphlet there. That's the only thing that most people have a clue about if they go read what the wake limits are. Otherwise, they don't know. I promise you. I've pulled and hollered and got boats to come over to my dock. Not a one, and we're talking about people that surveyed the land for Loch Lomond that fish it every day. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but there was two of them. He was just fishing around there, and I talked to him about it. Well, when you put in a Tyree, there's a no wake to the buoy. Yeah, what about after? No. Well, you just hammer down, go wherever, next shoreline, doesn't matter. That's the real world, guys. When you come off the main channel coming down Tyree, you got one buoy that says no ski. Everybody is supposed to know no tubing. Nobody knows that. Labor Day weekend, thank goodness there wasn't an accident. I see it all the time because I'm about right in the middle of the channel on the west side. Pontoon was coming down. A teenager was sitting at the front of the pontoon. They were pulling a tube, a big chair, whatever you want to call it, had a bunch of little kids in it. It was way past dark enough to have the lights on, going down towards the landing, and I put a call in to them, and all they had was an answering machine on. To cut to the quick and treat it like if you had to go into downtown Bentonville with no street signs, four-way intersections, whatever. I suggested the last time the buoy that says no skiing, put a bigger, like a derrick buoy, no skiing, no wake, put your linear footage limit on it so everybody can see it. Obviously, that's not flying. Put another buoy beside it, no tubing, so that they can see it's no skiing or no tubing, or put a bigger buoy where you can have both of them on there. Signage. Put a sign at every boat ramp, wooden sign. Put it in a 5-gallon, 10-gallon concrete bucket. Put it at the edge of the boat ramp, where they have to see it when they go unload the boat. They're walking right by it. They're not going to walk over to a bulletin board, guys. Nobody is. Nobody's going to read that. But if it's at the boat ramp, they've got to look at it when they get out of their vehicle, their fishing buddies, whatever, they see it. Put on there, no wake within 200, 300 feet of shoreline or permanent structure. They'll see it. Put a sign at the gas pump. They'll see it. Put a sign on the front door going into the, whatever y'all call it, where you sell minnows, crickets, license and everything over at Loch Lomond. They'll see it. get a little bitty sign, put it on the pontoon boats, the rental pontoon boats. So when they see it, when they're taking it out, they'll see it. Because they don't know. I promise you, they don't know. Now, wake boats, I was a teenager, I had V-drives, loved them. We was over on 10 Killer. And it doesn't bother me at all for people to go down the middle of the channel on Tyree Raceway. But where I do have an issue is nobody can gauge distance. 100 foot is nothing. You might as well say 25 feet. Because when I have my kids, my grandkids, and the neighbors, and the ones up north have a lot out there in their canoes and their paddle boards, the wash and the wakes, well, they have to sit down on the paddle boards. It's dangerous. 100 foot is nothing. Needs to be 200 or 300 foot, or we need to make Tyree Raceway a no-wake channel, just like your other two channels. My place is just as valuable to me as those places are to those folks that live on those channels. Everybody gets it going down the other two channels towards Granton Park and I forgot the name of the other one. I've only lived here for 2 years, I'm sorry. When you enter that bay, going to those two, it says no wake. I would say you probably don't get as many issues with those homeowners as you would on Loch Lomond. But if you can't get them to the center by the signs and or giving them tickets, then I say make Tyree a no-wake channel. And if we can't give them tickets, let's get somebody else to patrol it. You start giving tickets where they have to pay for something, I think the word will get around pretty quick. Because forever, I'm assuming, you lake rangers, you talk to them, and that's as far as it goes. You know, I read the reports, you got 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000. I never knew there was that many boats out there, so evidently we have a lot of repeat offenders. So what are we solving here? Nothing. What would an Arkansas Game and Fish Commissioner do? He'd write a ticket. They'd be paying some money. I don't want to go that far, but it's just not working, guys. And Lord help us, somebody gets hurt out there. I've been here for 2 years now, and I look at those boats coming by, and I'll wave at them, honk at them, I'll tell them to slow down or scoot over to the middle of the channel. Or when they come by slow, I'll give them a thumbs up and holler at them because they can hear me. Appreciate the no wake, and they holler back, you know. We have a little conversation, a couple of them. I appreciate those folks. I don't appreciate the big waves that come in and the upheaval, on my deck. It ruins it. I don't appreciate when I'm fortunate that I've got electric lift, but if I don't have it up and it's just sitting in the dock with the heavy waves that come in from the wake boats are the worst. And really, the slower they go, the bigger the waves they are in our channel. And it rocks the boat, and you're hitting the slips. That's not good. So,
Okay.
that's
We'll note
that's
your
all I
comments.
got. If you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay,
Thank you for your suggestions.
thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Scott Neal. I live on 57 Mayfair Drive. I've lived on the lake for 15 years. When my wife and I moved here, actually we lived in Rogers before, and when we moved to Bella Vista, specifically moved on Lake Windsor, the reason we did it was because you allowed boats and allowed wakeboard boats. I've raised 3 children who have now left and gone off to the university, and now I have one left that's 12 years old. And I think, I don't know a lot of the details around the conversations. I think what Andy talked about was enlightening. But for me, as I think about it, and we think about the distance from the shore and those other things, one is when people bought their property and when people moved and decided to live on those lakes, it was based on the rules and regulations that were in place. Homeowner value and other things are tied to that. And as you think about the future and looking forward to the future without looking an eye to the past, where do we think it's going? Do we think it's going to less or more? And we think about the value of what this community brings, tourism, quality of life, and the other things. I think the conversation needs to look and through a filter of where we want to be versus where we've been. The other piece that I would think about too is there's two things that are coming out in these conversations. One of which is safety, right? And the other is damage to property or shoreline. If we're talking about safety, whether it's a wakeboard boat or another kind of boat, I would argue that someone going out and doing donuts in a boat with a tube is going to be a lot more dangerous than an experienced wakeboard driver who understands what's happening behind them and is paying attention. I'd also say from a damage standpoint, for those of you who've been out on boats, is someone doing circles in a lake is going to do 10x the damage of someone who's going straight up and down, and when they drop the boarder, they stop, they turn around and go get that boarder. But when you have boats circling and creating, massive disruption in the water, I think that's a whole nother conversation. The way you drive and how you drive, having been on bass boats, ski boats, wakeboard boats, I can promise you I've been on a bass boat that did a lot more damage than any wakeboard I've ever been on. The other piece too is as you're looking at boats and figuring out, which boats are acceptable and which aren't. I mean, how do you determine that, right? I have a 2004 wakeboard boat that's 23 feet, flat bottom. So if I'm driving along without my ballast full, I'm creating less wake than any ski boat ever will. Now, when I fill my ballast, it's going to create a wake. The question is, are we going to pull people over that are driving a wakeboard boat without ballast in it? Or are we going to look, is there going to be some sort of grid that looks at, well, your boat's a 2004, it's a wake setter, so, is there some matrix we're going to look at? I think that we have to think about it in terms of what is it we're trying to prevent? Is it safety? Is it damage? And if it's damage, do we really know that these wakeboards are creating the damage that may have been represented? And so, again, I'm no expert on all of the pieces that have been put forward, but I will tell you as a homeowner who bought my piece of property and has invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in my home to stay where we're at, and a lot of it is around family fun and using my boat, to have maybe a few characters in the community that are determining that for the rest of us with none of us really knowing what's happening or this vote was even happening is really scary actually and disconcerting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, sir.
Yeah.
What you explained is exactly what we're going through. This is a very difficult problem, and we're trying our best to do the right thing. Okay, because there's both sides of each thing here, and one of the things like that you said and the other gentleman said, one of the big problems we have is people's attitude. They do the same things out on the freeways that we do here in the lakes, and you can't change people's attitude very well. He said the man suggested we fine them. You only find so many people. It's a difficult problem, but I assure you that this is not going to be an easy thing to solve, and we're going to make sure that when we come up with a solution, that it's going to be the right solution.
Yeah, I don't intend to make it sound like it's an easy decision. I understand you're trying to take all those pieces into account, but lakes by their very nature can be dangerous. And then you get into, okay, are we driving boats at night? I live on the main thoroughfare, and I see bass boats going by 100 miles an hour at night. So my kids can't swim at night, right? Are we going to, have hours of boat usage on the lake? The other thing is alcohol. The fish.
Well, there are speed limits on the lake.
Well, you wouldn't think so, right?
You just
Yeah.
answered my.
No,
my-
but it's pitch black.
Right.
Right. They
right.
can't see they can't see if something's in front
Right.
of them. The other thing is alcohol on the lake. There may or may not. I don't know what the rules are about alcohol on the lake, but I can tell you the fishermen have a tremendous amount of alcohol on the lake. So are we going to go and just have it be a police state, or what is it we're actually thinking about? So there's a lot of things to think about.
Right.
I understand.
Yeah, we understand it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is James Graves. I appreciate the opportunity to come up and speak about, or to speak to you about my concerns. I live at 27 Neffwood Lane, which is on Lake Windsor. I've been there for just under 3 years now. Moved here with my family about 2.5 years ago to take a job. And just like some gentlemen that have already spoken here, I chose a home specifically on a lake that we could have some activities, some recreational activities, some skiing, make some wake, maybe have a wake boat if I want to in the future, but to have that sort of activity. I bought a home on Lake Windsor, like I mentioned. I then went and invested $25,000 to build a dock, okay? I bought a boat and the whole 9 yards. I'm invested in the community. So I'm not sure the decision the board's gonna make, and I know it's a difficult one, okay? But I think that consideration needs to be made for the folks that invested in the community specifically and chose specifically on those lakes that allows this activity. If I didn't want to be on a wake lake, I would have chosen another lake. There were a lot of other options. It really limited my options on a house to buy specifically to get on a lake, because there's not a lot of houses available, okay, that I can actually have some wake and some fun. So I really, I really appreciate the signage. I think that is a valid thing, because I came from Arizona. Not a lot of water there, not a lot of lake activity. So it's difficult for me to judge distance sometimes, and I think the signage could be better. I think that'd be very helpful, actually, to have some buoys marking some distances, because I myself wonder sometimes, am I too close? Because I don't want to be too close. I don't want to ruin people's property, okay? So I think that's a really, really good, maybe an initial fix. Try some signage, see if that works. Because I think a lot of people, they want to do the right thing. They don't want to be disruptive, okay? But we also invested in Bella Vista, in the lake, and where we're at specifically for that reason. And it would reduce my property value if the next owner or somebody who's going to buy, well, we can do nothing but fish out here now. And I know that's not where you're going with this, but these things are incremental, okay? Because wake is wake, no matter how it's created. And I have a 19-foot, a small ebb tide, a ski boat. I can create a lot of wake in the thing just by going around, towing my kids around, having some fun on the lake, okay? So these things are incremental. You're gonna, if you ban wake boats. Guess what? In 2 years, people come back, that didn't work. Okay, ban this, ban that, lessen this channel, or whatever the case is, where you could have some fun, okay? So these things are gonna be incremental. And I don't know, and I feel for people. I don't live on the main body, so I don't experience that. But what I do experience, and I don't have a problem with it, but a lot of fishermen come back, they're fishing under my dock, and they're all over the place. And I lose what I think is some privacy at times, but I don't come here griping about that, okay? Because that's part of where I that's part of where I bought my house. That's to be expected, okay? If I bought on the main body, I'd expect, you know what? When you folks lowered Lake Windsor last year, I would ask and maybe a lot of people did, but how many people applied for permits to strengthen seawalls and to do activity like that to help mitigate any sort of damage they've been experiencing? Maybe a lot of people did, and if they did, good for them. Maybe nobody did, and if they didn't, then why not? Okay, because I had the opportunity to do that when the lake was lowered. Okay, that happens every 7 years. You lower a lake, people can do some work to mitigate damage. So I think there's a lot of different ways to mitigate this without jumping right to the extremes. And I think the signage thing is a great idea, because I myself wonder sometimes. To be honest with you, when the no ski, I had to ask somebody, does that mean no tubing too? Okay, so that's a valid thing, because not a lot of people grow up around lakes and know that sort of stuff, okay? One last thing, some folks know me here, okay, and know what I do. I came here in the capacity as a citizen, okay? But I also ask you to consider enforcement. It's going to be a drain on the police department if the lake rangers continually have to call to try to enforce activity they can enforce, okay? Because that's the only way to mitigate this sort of thing, is if people are trespassed from lakes when they won't leave, okay? And we all know the police department has to do that. Okay? Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Both last two speakers, I respect your desire to.
Would you come up to the phone, please?
Hi, I'm Don Weiniger. I live at 91 Mayfair Drive. And I spoke here last time you had your meeting. And I'll direct a question to you guys. We also invested to live on a lake in an environment where you can have a lot of fun, skiing, boating, tubing, and kayaking, and canoeing. And now we have a problem with these giant wakes coming in from your boats that are disrupting that ability of us to enjoy our privacy and our enjoyment on the lake. We have wakes coming in that shoot up to our boards and our deck, 6 feet high. I don't understand why can you not understand hundreds of people bought property just like you did to live on a lake, that now you're disrupting our enjoyment and you're damaging our property. I don't want to be a bad neighbor to you, but I don't want you to be a bad neighbor to me. So understand where we're coming from. It's not right that you create the environment you do when you create these huge waves that come into our docks and shorelines. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Stacy Sears, and I live at 31 Brompton Drive on Lake Windsor. We've owned our house for 2 years, and I second what most things have been said here. Our sole reason for buying this property, and right now it's a second home that we hope to make a permanent home eventually, but our sole reason was for recreation. And I have 4 kids ranging from 12 to 5, and it's been a great activity for us to be able to boat on the lake, and we have a lot of fun, and we do all of it. We do surfing and skiing and kneeboarding and tubing. So my proposal would be, if this is a ban, I want to see studies that prove that it's the boats that cause the damage, not the weather. Because just recently, my husband is very involved in the emergency preparedness fair that will be in Northwest Arkansas in a couple weeks, and Darby Bybee was at this luncheon they had in preparation for it, who is a local weatherman, and he was talking about how in the last 2 years he has seen more intense weather in Northwest Arkansas than he has seen his whole career. And that, I think, is what causes more damage to our boats and docks than boats that are really only, like Mr. Grover said, Saturdays is really the only times I ever see another boat. If we take our boat out in the evenings, we have the lake to ourselves every single time. I don't think, as few of boats are out on the lake, I don't think that's what's causing damage to our boat docks and seawalls. We just recently strengthened our seawall this spring. I think that's just a cost you incur when you're living the dream of living on a lake. And in my opinion, it's worth the cost, because dreams cost money sometimes. I don't think that boats are doing as much damage as maybe people that are proposing a ban think they're doing. And I am 100% for enforcing this 200-foot rule or communicating better. I love the idea of let's make sure people are aware of it. Let's pull people over that aren't doing it so they're just aware of it. Maybe they're not, but I think we need to see studies that prove boats are doing as much damage as we think they're doing before we ban them. That's all I have to say.
Ma'am,
Yes.
to my knowledge, we have not proposed a ban to anything at this time. Is that correct?
In our discussions, at the last meeting, there was discussions about where it's appropriate, and if we increase to certain distances, whether it
But
be.
I'm talking about a ban on certain boats. We have not proposed that.
That was the discussion last time, was a possible, so,
If it was increased to the 300 feet, it would have to be limited to Loch Lomond.
Loch Lomond.
but that was discussion only.
That was a discussion only by the POA committee.
Correct.
This committee here, as far as I can remember, and I've been to every meeting, has never proposed a ban on any boat on these lakes.
It's right here in the minutes. I mean, it's the wakeboard regulation, and it says it would be limited to Loch Lomond only. It's lake and lake.
Sir, that was what the POA board came up with. That was a possibility.
So we'll consider that
Yeah, but this committee, the Lakes Committee, has the job of looking at all these different things and coming up with a decision by December 1st of what we're going to do about this problem. And it is a problem. Everybody knows that. And we're doing our best to come up with the right solution. But up to this point, I have never heard a person in this committee suggest that we ban certain boats.
Stacy, did you, when you chose to buy on Windsor, are you in the wake area or no wake area?
We're just off the main channel. So we're in a no wake, but just by like one house lane. And we chose to buy on Windsor because it allowed recreation use. That was the number one reason. We were looking at Windsor or Loch Lomond, and that was the only properties we even considered. And my husband, when this came up, he goes, this would be enough to drive me out to Beaver. Like, he put a for sale sign up. If you're trying to draw people to Bella Vista that are younger, you have to consider, the bike trails, all of that really draws the younger crowds. And then you put bans on stuff, and it drives them elsewhere. And it would drive us, it's a second home. It wouldn't be that hard for us to say, let's go somewhere else. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Bella Vista lakes are small lakes, folks. And for every large boat that we have on our lakes, we probably have 10, maybe 20 small ones, kayaks, self-powered watercraft. And safety, I believe, is our number one priority. And so we don't have many people here today talking about the effects of big boats on the safety of the small boats. But believe me, there are problems there with big wakes having to upset the usage of a lake by the small self-powered watercraft. We're talking about damage to boat docks and damage to, that is a concern. But our number one problem, from my point of view anyway, is safety to the great majority of lake users.
Okay. Yes.
So my name is Jacob Wilbranson. I don't currently live on a lake, but I'm an aspirational lake homeowner. Just in the past 2 months, we've looked at a house on Lake Anne, house on Lake Windsor, and actually, I can tell you the price just dropped on another one on Windsor, and we're scheduled to look at that one shortly. So we've been in Bella Vista for 11 years. We chose it specifically because of that. I actually grew up in like a wakeboarding family. So I grew up wakeboarding in Colorado. When I moved out here, that was a major part of my decision. And the only two lakes actually we've considered even are Anne and Windsor because of those specific reasons. We want to stay in the Bentonville School District, so that's important with us in the schools that our kids are going to. So that's why those two are really our only considerations, not even Loch Lomond. And on top of that, we have brought out, so again, my family's a wakeboarding family. We have brought out, from my parents from Colorado have brought their boat here just to come spend the week here wakeboarding. We got it registered and everything for that, the temporary permit and all that here. So we have had the full, surfing, wakeboarding boat here. In fact, I don't even own a boat yet, but I even have my own wakeboard here. So it is something that's important to me, and it is a reason why I chose to live here. So a couple of things. One, growing up in a wakeboarding family, we learned a lot about safety, right, and how you go around the lake, even the direction you go around the lake, that I think can be communicated much more clearly. I think right now, because honestly, it's pretty much a free for all between the direction that like the bass boats and everybody's are going, the way they're going up and down the shores, and the lack of boats, that people are just generally going whichever direction they want to. In most lakes, there's a clear direction. This is the way you go around, and it helps to clarify it. In regards to the shoreline, a good family friend of ours, and we actually would even store our boat periodically at his dock. Something that they have on their lake, and this is back in Colorado, is you're able, if you're concerned about people encroaching on your shoreline, you're able to purchase your own buoy. They'll place it for you, but it's at your cost. Just like, and I thought about that, and I was like, it's similar to even here. My neighbors, where I live, they wanted, they felt like our circle was too dark over on their side. They paid that additional fee so they could have a street light by them. I mean, maybe one possible consideration is for those people who are concerned about boats encroaching on their space and going too fast on there, to be able to have that option to pay for a buoy, like a no-wake buoy that would go in front of that section that would help direct that shoreline. It's maybe one possible consideration. I do, again, I don't live on there currently, but I do understand that it's a cost. But I am much more a fan of the 150 to 200 distance, just again to be able to, when you think about safety, right? If we're talking about encroaching, even if they're all traveling in the same loop, if somebody, if you're wakeboarding, somebody goes down, you loop around to go get them. When you're doing that and it's encroached into such a small space, we start looking at 300 feet off the shoreline, then you are starting to talk about a safety issue. If there's a skier in the water and you're having to loop around with other boats, right? They still need, it's not just the ability to go up and down the middle, like what Andy said, you do need room to maneuver, you do need room to go around other people. And just even other boats, right? If we consider like the surfing speeds are significantly slower, and I know that's one thing that a lot of people don't like, but they're going like 10 miles an hour maybe, whereas a wakeboard, depending on the person, it's 20 or like 15 to 25 miles per hour depending on the person. So that, and then I mean my final consideration again still, and I dare say that I probably use the lake as much as many of the fishermen, not in the traditional ways. I'm on the lakes during the summer almost every day. I'm training for an Ironman, and so I'm swimming across those lakes. And it's not just the wakeboarding boats. I've had a bass fisherman run into me, not at slow speeds, thank goodness, but they were just fishing, had their boat in idle, just moving forward slowly, and they literally ran into me while I was swimming. So I mean, there's consideration that has to happen regardless of whether you're in a wakeboard boat or a bass boat, and I think just greater consideration of what that is, and whether that's increased signage, whether that's improved messaging across the board. I think that's going to be at the very least the first step, right? Before you start, and I know we haven't talked about banning things, but definitely before you start banning things, and definitely before you start decreasing the amount of lake you can use, let's improve the messaging so they understand what portion they're supposed to be able to use before you start taking more drastic steps that could affect people's where people decide to live. I mean, I can honestly say if either of those lakes were limited to where I couldn't wakeboard on them, I mean it would be a deal killer for me. And I am literally in the market trying to purchase a home on one of those lakes. So, any questions?
I have a question, it's a little bit off subject, but do you wear anything or tow anything that would make you more visible when you're swimming?
Yeah, I do actually. I have a buoy that straps around my waist, and it's bright orange and floats right behind me. Absolutely. Yeah.
You do some miles out there.
I do. It's coming up. I have to make it 2.5 miles swim. So if I circumnavigate Lake Anne, for example, it's almost exactly 2.5 miles. So.
Can I ask a clarification question? Talk about wakeboarding. You can wakeboard off a ski boat.
You can. No, it's true. It's true. But so my family's had both, right? So we had a Chris Craft that it was just more of a true outboard, right? Less definitely produced less wake, but it was, I'll be honest, it was a lot less fun. And then we got a wakeboarding boat, and we could do a lot more, and it was a big deal for us.
Wakeboarding,
a board that you can surf on, that you can even wakeboard behind it better. Frankly, it just creates a much better wake. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Randy Murray. I live at 2551 Forest Hills Boulevard. We also have some property over on the east side, just kind of off of Lake Ann. I've lived in Bella Vista since 2005. I'm a contractor, commercial contractor, and I've had a boat since 2005. I've had probably like 7 boats since 2005. I currently own 2. I've got a 22-foot Cobalt. And it's traditionally a ski boat, but I can make a huge wake if I want. I also own a 17-foot, 10-inch tracker bass boat, and I can make a big old freaking wake in that thing too. You know, it just depends on how fast you drive. And anyway, one of the things that I know about is I was more familiar, honestly, when I moved to Bella Vista with Hot Springs Village. And that was one of the reasons we chose to live in Bella Vista, because of the environment in Hot Springs Village. And we skied. My grandparents built a house there in 1985, and man, I skied and everything, you know. And I would say, you know, there's a few things that I've noticed really here. One of the things that I've been kind of surprised by, especially, you know, from my career, is the quality of dock construction here versus the quality of dock construction in Hot Springs Village. I mean, we drop a lake here pretty much every year. They drop a lake there pretty much every year. And it's just something I've seen and been aware of since I was a kid. They build them different down there, and they have less problems, I think, down there. It's just, you know, you see docks here that are a year or two old, and it doesn't matter if they're in the ski zone or not in the ski zone. If that dock hasn't been there very long, they drop that lake, you got piers hanging out of the water. It doesn't matter how much you spend on it. I mean, there's no engineering. I mean, I've seen the guys building these docks. I'm a commercial contractor. I wouldn't hire any of them. There's some horrible dock construction going on, and we can't blame that on anything but the guys building it. There's no engineering going into any of this stuff, you know. And that's part of the reason people are having problems. And the problems on the lake with erosion isn't new. We've been dropping lakes in Bella Vista, you know, for new construction and dock repairs since we started building lakes. I mean, before I was born, you guys were doing this, and so it's not a new thing. The wakeboard boats aren't creating erosion. Andy's already said, you know, that's the thing. We've talked about studies, but there isn't any reason for us to spend a penny on studies. Let's just read the research that's already out there. You know, there's more damage was done a week ago Monday when all the trees blew down than every wakeboard boat did to those lakes, and that's scientific. I mean, it's not something that we need to even debate. The wind did more damage to the docks and to the shorelines in one night while we were all sleeping through it than any of those wakeboard boats can do in an entire summer. And there just isn't that many out there. I mean, we go out all the time. Like, we go out pretty much at least once a week. And man, there's been years where we'll go out 2 or 3 different times in a week because the lakes are so close and convenient. We primarily go to Windsor. Another thing that I've found that, you know, kind of thought about too is you take into consideration, you know, like what property value was, you know, 20 or 30 years ago. You know, the lakes are busier now than they were 20 or 30 years ago. The quality of the houses on the lakes has improved significantly in the last several years. The quality of the boats on the lake has improved tremendously in the last several years. I remember when we first started going on the lake, there were so many crusty old docks. You know, my uncle was looking at retiring here, and he's just like, man, it just seems like some of these docks, as crappy as they are, we could just bulldoze these things down and build a nice house. It would be cheaper than just buying a lot, because it was just, there, you know, there's just old boats, old docks, you know, and I think that's part of it is, you know, people feel like, well, I haven't done any, you know, it's like painting your house. It's, if you haven't painted your house in 15 years and all of a sudden you need to paint your house, well, it isn't because something changed all of a sudden. You just haven't painted your house in a long time. And so the fact that your boat dock needs some maintenance isn't really a surprise. Like, that's what happens when you have a boat dock. It's what happens when you own anything. It's the cost of ownership. It's a first world problem, you know. Anyway, but as all this stuff is increased on the lake, so has property value. You know, people are benefiting from, you know, that lady that was sitting over here, they bought a house on Lake Windsor, don't even live here to do that. You're going to lose that. I mean, your property value is going to go down. It's everybody in this room knows a lake lot on any of the ski lakes is more valuable than a lake lot on any of the other lakes. And that's just a fact, and there's a reason to that. You know, you're literally playing around with millions of dollars with real estate with these decisions, and it's just, you know, needs to not be taken lightly. Another thing too on the safety issue, like, I mean, I'm in construction. Safety to me is like, man, you live and die by safety. And so the interesting thing to me though is we have 5 no-wake lakes in Bella Vista? Is there 5? I mean, if you want to kayak and you don't know how to kayak well enough to be able to handle a wake from a boat, go to one of those lakes. There's way more of them. There's more areas in Windsor. There's more shoreline in Windsor that's no wake than there is wake shoreline in Windsor. There's plenty of places to go kayak. There's plenty of places to do all that stuff. We have, if anything, we have an incredible amount of places for people to swim, where you're just not in contact with any kind of boat making any kind of speed at all. And as far as safety is concerned, you know, the wake's one thing to consider, but speed's another thing to consider. You know, like, to the perfect speed, in my opinion, to wake surf is 11 miles an hour. That's slow. That's super slow. I mean, it's incredibly slow. And that's the beauty of wake surfing, man. If you've ever wake surfed, it's so fantastic. It's like you're up on this like incredible, and you can do it when the lake's crappy. You can do it when it's windy. That's one of the things about wake surfing is it just doesn't matter. It's just the wake's perfect. And when you fall into this like incredibly soft thing. It's like, it's fantastic. It's like golf. You can do it when you're old because it's just so low impact. You know, wakeboarding, like I wakeboard at 19.5 miles an hour. Like, to me, that's the perfect speed to wakeboard. It's just not that fast. You know, you know, to ski, like I pull a guy a lot on a slalom ski. He's like 28 miles an hour, you know, and bass boats, I mean, all those guys go 80 mile an hour. And so, you know, if you're really going to talk about safety, you know, speed, none of these things that we're discussing are really dangerous options. They're all so much safer just because of the speed. And you're not going fast. You can't make a good wake, you know, as good a wake going fast, and you don't want to. You can't cut on the wakeboard like you can, you know, or at high speeds. And so, you know, all those sports, you know, a lot of the reasons they really catch on is because of the safety component to them. You don't crash as hard on a wakeboard as you do on skis. You don't, like, you crash on wake surfing, it's like falling in slow motion. It's like kind of bizarre. You just slowly sink into the water, and they really are, you know, lower impact and safer for the people that are doing them. And you know, like Scott said, you pull in a straight line when you're doing that stuff. Where you're on a tube, you know, you've got to create some excitement, and so you're just turning around constantly. And so anyway, I think, you know, to me, you know, the poor quality of the dock construction around here is the main thing, you know, as far as damage to it. You know, I did some repairs for a friend of mine. There's, you know, 2 guys that sent in the letters. I know both of them. Anyway, one of the guys, I did a bunch of dock repair, and he lives off the main body but back in a cove on Windsor, and he gets 0 wake from the lake. And we put 16 yards of shotcrete up underneath his eroded footings, you know, and it's just, 16 cubic yards, so that's what, 64,000 pounds of shotcrete up underneath some footings that had just washed out. And he's an east-west line cove, so it's the second cove from the dam on the right-hand side if you're going out to the main body, and he lives way back up in that cove. He gets almost no wind, he gets almost no wake ever. Like, I mean, we swim back there all the time, and it's like the calmest, hands down, the calmest cove on Windsor. And he lives way back in the back of it, and he had, you know, 16 cubic yards worth of erosion that he needed to replace. We put in like 32 piers or piles. We drove them all the way down into bedrock, and, you know, just reinforced it in a way that it never had been. But the reason for that is that the real problem with the lakes is the ground's coming down like this and the water's hitting up against it. It's the perfect scenario for erosion. And that's what happens is the water's touching it and the water's constantly pulling it down the hill. You know, the bottom of the lake's not as deep as it used to be, and the sides of the lake keep getting a little steeper, and it's just because of erosion. And there's, he has probably the best scenario for no erosion at Lake Windsor, but, the elements are just there, and they're working on it 365 days a year,
Can you make a statement about, and maybe you're not willing to do this,
Sure.
the single biggest problem with construction of docks here on our lakes that you noticed?
So any structural component, like I would say, no matter what you're building, a house, anything, to be structural, you have to have, like a house, you put in footings. If you have a house on like really crummy soil, you got to put in piers. You have to have some significant base for the whole thing to sit on. And almost all the stuff I ever see is just way too small and not deep enough. They just put it on top, a couple feet down, and just the gravelly fill on top of it, and then it just washes away because it's not substantial. I mean, it's not ever deep enough in anything significant. And you just see it all the time. You see footings, whenever you lower the lakes, go out and fish one. Just look, there's unlimited number of footings and piers just hanging in the air or laying on the bottom of the lake, and it's because they never were put deep enough to be anything structural. They were just there, and the weight of the dock is holding them down. And honestly, that's one of the things, like, if Bella Vista was Beaver Lake for 1 year, there'd be about 6 docks left on the whole lake. Because
Randy,
Beaver Lake goes up
thanks
and
for your
down.
time.
Bella Vista doesn't. So
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
Errol Wasson. I live at 97 Mayfair. I'm on the main channel of Lake Windsor. I want to thank the committee for considering the issues on the table. From my experience on the dock, my dock, the waves coming in from a wake boat are at least 2.5, 3.5 foot high. On a busy day where there's holiday weekend, when there's a lot of skiing and a lot of traffic on the lake, the ski boats, they create waves, they create movement. It gets choppy, but it's more in the foot and a half, maybe at the most 2 foot. From a safety point of view, if you've got somebody out swimming, on float devices, kayaking, paddle boards, it's a safety issue with the wake boats because the waves are coming in, and if they're anywhere near a seawall or a dock, they're going to be pushed right into it. So I think from a safety point of view, you're addressing an issue that needs to be addressed, and I hope you make a sound decision that solves the problem.
When you observed these waves, were the boats close or were they far away?
Mid-lake.
Mid-lake.
Yeah, they were going down. I've not really seen a wake boat. It's usually typically in the center channel of the lake. They're usually not real close to the shore. They probably are much further than the 150 foot. They've honored that. I'm not complaining about that. It's just the waves they create. They're huge. I can sit on the dock and get wet from their waves. And it can be choppy and busy on a holiday weekend with ski boats, and it never gets close to being that high. But thank you for considering it. It's an issue and a safety thing that I think has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that I'm here, have a couple lifeguards, or I blew it, bodyguards, I should. But anyway, Mr. Judson, during a presentation of the new fees, referenced this committee as far as the boat fees. And I don't know if you recall, but I've been here before talking about that. And the question has come up, well, where did these fees come from, the way we do it. And a past director, the chairman of the POA board, told me that they did it because that's the way the state does it. Well, we're not the state. I pay $15 for 3 years at the state for an 18-foot boat. And I can't believe that the people in this state are so cheap. I mean, that's just because they're always asking for money. They're always looking for money. And when I look at this, I see the same thing. Some people, their fee went down by 85%. Mine went down a little over 15%. You got people here paying $15 a year, and they're in a boat that's a fishing boat. You know, you can go out there with a 9-horse, 14-foot boat, equipped, you know, to the nines, and you're paying $15. I go out there, in mine, I'm paying $125. This is a POA. Everybody should pay the same. I got in a little discussion with a lady about this. She says, well, I can only get one person in my boat. Well, let's look at our houses. I know how many people I can get in my house. And I've seen houses that will take in a lot more people than mine. And we pay $24 a month, every one of us. I know this isn't passed, so that's why I'm bringing it up. Because it hasn't been voted on. But what strikes me about one of the things here was this $108 fee. Let's see if I can find it here. Less than 10 horsepower, $108 went down to 15. What? But that fee strikes me as a good fee for everybody. I don't care if you've got a 10-foot dinghy or a 30-foot party boat. It's a POA. Everybody ought to pay the same. If you look at everything else we do in the POA, everybody pays the same. Is that right? Would you agree with me? Anybody disagree with that? But not boats. It angers me that a POA board of directors would look to the state of Arkansas on how they should charge for the use of boats on POA lakes. That is really alarming. You know, I think, when you live in a POA, I mean, the minute I can't afford to live here and enjoy what we have and pay the fees, I'm leaving. I mean, when you move to this community, I know there's people I've run into, people that say, well, I didn't realize we had to pay $24 a month. Well, okay, but they didn't do their homework. I had an advantage because I had a brother that lived here before me, so he filled me in on everything. I mean, I would have probably been just as ignorant, but that's crucial that people know. And I think these fees suggest, this whole thing to me suggests something's wrong. I mean, I know we're not poor. We can afford it. And if we can't afford it, it's time to move on. That's all I can say.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Another thing I wanted to mention was habitat. Okay, on our no-wake lakes, okay, if we were going to, and I know this question is, you're probably going to answer it, Rick, but if we were going to get into placing habitat, whatever that means, I mean, I read a whole article about habitat and fish attractors, and they're not necessarily the same. And people tell me, years ago, when they came here 30 years ago, the fishing was fantastic. Habitat, it's not there anymore. Then at one of the meetings, Rick mentioned, that they're cleaning up brush that's fallen, helping property owners clean up brush that's fallen into the lake. And I've always been curious about why we can't do something in these no-wake zones, especially no-wake lakes, where we can use this brush. I have no clue about how it would be done, but it just seems to me that based on my experience from fishing as a kid, I always headed for the brush, the habitat. Crappies, I can remember crappies galore in these fallen trees, and I just don't understand why we aren't doing something that when we have so much brush, and like people said about Lake Ann, well, that's really a tragedy over there. But I think some of that could probably be just pulled down into the lakes.
Excuse me, Dan.
Anchored.
You're a member of Fly Tires, right?
I am.
Yes.
Yeah,
You are aware that we put Christmas trees in the lakes?
I am aware of that.
Okay, that's habitat.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Okay.
Yes. But
Dan, it's been about 8 minutes.
I'm not talking about something that has.
Dan, if you could cut it short, we'd appreciate it. You've talked about 8 minutes now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I want to tell you my name first, though. Dan Gilman.
We know.
Yeah.
We got it, Dan.
36 Kirkcaldy Drive.
We got it, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
I know we're going over, but I can't be here next month, so I'm going to go ahead and jump up here this month. First off, hey, Gracie. Her and Russ chaperoned me on my first lower elk kayak ride, and I really enjoyed it. I'm Jackie Gain, and I live on 4 Castleford on Lake Ann. I don't know if that was my email because there's other Lake Ann folks here, but I did send an email on some concerns, and Rick just recommended maybe come to the Lakes Committee. So that's why I'm here. I am also on the lake a lot. I'd say 3 to 5 times a week I'm on the lake. Currently kayak a lot. I have 6 kayaks and 1 22-foot pontoon. But I know Andy says he's out there every Saturday. I see him. I love it. I think it's great that people are enjoying the lake. I hope to get a boat after the lake is back up in the spring to have a ski boat. I am a tuber, so you're never too old to tube, and I also ski and wakeboard, but I'm a recreational wakeboard. My kids are all grown, but they're avid wakeboarders, and they don't live here. But my grandkids, I like to teach to wakeboard. And I had a lake house on Beaver right outside of Prairie Creek. We have sold that since we've moved to Bella Vista. And where we were, I would not be comfortable teaching. I have grandkids from age 15 to age 1. And I would not be comfortable teaching my kids to wakeboard where we had our lake house there, except for between 7 and 9 a.m. and maybe between 7:30 and 8:30 at night, because it's just a lot of traffic. You can go in the coves, but I don't have a trailer. I don't plan to get a trailer, so I'm hoping that I can teach my grandkids to wakeboard here, and then when they get avid, they can go out where they want to do all their big stuff. I guess the one reason that I feel like I have one more question to ask is that I happened on the last month's committee, didn't know what was going on, but I happened to on it and listen to it, and I thought I had heard Mr. Judson say that one of the things this committee may look at would be to look at not having wakeboard activity on Ann or Windsor, and that limit the activity to Loch Lomond. And I would be very disappointed if I could not wakeboard on my lake. And to the gentleman's point back here, of course, whatever you guys decide as far as safety, surfing, wakeboarding boats, but at the very minimum, please don't outlaw or ban the wakeboard activity from a ski boat. And you guys will have to decide if we can do it with a wakeboard or surfing and if that's safe or not. But I just would request to not ban the activity itself from the other two smaller lakes.
Jackie, when you wakeboard,
Yes.
do you add ballast?
I currently don't have a wakeboard boat, but the wakeboard boat that I wakeboard from, yes, it has ballast and it's on beaver. And the other thing is my dock and boat is right split in the middle between a no wake, no ski. So we're kind of split right where we get half of it is wake and half of it is not wake. And I currently don't have any problems, but like Andy said, we don't have a lot of wakeboard activity out on our lake, so it's probably not good representation.
Anybody else? All right, we'll certainly consider all those opinions as we move towards looking at this proposal and making a decision on it. Rick, do you want to still do your thing on blue algae if you got a few minutes, or?
Well, before that, I'd just like to say that all we do is make a recommendation to the POA, and the POA makes the final decision on any rule changes. So I want to be sure everybody understands that.
We're an advisory committee, so
we
can't
are
make
advisory
a
only.
decision. The board makes the final decision.
I think it's great to have these people come, right, and be willing to speak up. I think this is more useful to me than you guys probably imagine, so thank you.
Yes.
I agree with that.
The POA decision is in December, did you say?
I think if anything is decided on, it would be for effective in 2020. Any kind of regulation has to go into that pamphlet that's given out to the boat owners when they register in the spring.
How many people signed the petition to bring this up? I heard it was only like 20.
I don't know that I know that.
No. I'm not aware of any petition.
Yeah,
So there,
what I heard was it was only 20 people, and I would be interested to know how many households that is, because, you know, it could be like 6.
so the petition came from residents at Lake Windsor, and I'm going to say that you're in the right neighborhood, around 20, and there were some husband and wives on that list. So.
If we go back, I believe it was 2 to 3 years ago, we had a similar petition from a group on Loch Lomond. So it's not the first time it's come up. It's not the first time a group of homeowners approached the Lakes JAC about the problem.
Well, the people I've talked to in Loch Lomond, they throw their hands up. Nothing's gonna be done, it's the same, you just gotta get used to it. And I said, well, I'm not that type of person, so I'm gonna go voice my opinion. Here I am. I wouldn't wash it over that there's not people interested, there really is. If you'll see some direction, concrete solutions to it, I think that's the best for everybody. And like Paul mentioned, safety above everything else.
So, was it late last week? You asked that we talk about toxic algae?
Yeah, I sent you an email.
Okay. There's been a lot in the news about the issue. Blue-green algae, which can produce toxins. And, when you're talking about your health or your animal's health, it's, it's something that is of legitimate concern. But we wanted to maybe kind of dispel some of the myths that were out there. I don't have as much of a water quality background as my assistant John and our current senior technician Chris Fuller. So for the most part, I'm going to defer this discussion to them, and feel free to ask us questions at any point along the way. But who wants to take it?
You want to take it? You want me to take it? I'll let you go. Well, I'll speak first. So I guess I should just say, first off, not every bloom is blue-green algae, as you've probably imagined, and actually blue-green algae is a little of a mislabel. It's actually, they're bacteria. They're cyanobacteria. There are several different types of these organisms. They're fairly cosmopolitan throughout the world. They're in almost every water body that you've ever come in contact with. They're in the soil. They're nearly everywhere. Usually when we have problems, everybody hear me okay? It's pretty predictable. We know when we're going to have a problem, or we know whenever we could possibly have a problem. To date, we haven't had any of those issues. What we hear about most of the time in the news is a very specific species of algae, which we do have, but we have never had it in a quantity that has been alarming to any of the people that have taken looks at our samples. That's fair to say. So let's see, what else do we want to talk about as far as protocol or?
Right. Well, we're going to be developing a protocol that we can follow should there be an issue that arises. First we take an observation, or someone observes a potential problem. They let our office know, or we observe it ourselves. Then we actually have a retired phycologist, he's got a doctorate in the study of this kind of thing, and he is more than willing to look at these organisms under a scope, and he will then let us know if we need to do any further testing. The testing is a little bit unknown to this point about of cost or even availability. There's some test strips that can be used, but the utility of that is a little bit in question. And maybe I'll let Chris pick it up from here.
Yeah. So. Assays for cyanotoxins are pretty limited. And really the only cyanotoxins that have been greatly developed are the microcystins, as John mentioned. There's one specific species of blue-green that tends to cause a problem most of the time, and that's microcystis, and it releases microcystin, the toxin. And that's really the only toxin that has had reliable and the majority of assays developed for. So as far as I know, there are no laboratories in the area that test for microcystin or any cyanotoxin at all. I'm having one of our labs look into this further to see if he knows anybody that could do it for us. As Rick mentioned, we do have access to a test strip, but if anybody's familiar with pH strips, they have blocked segments on them, and the colors of the strip change, and you can kind of hold it up to a key on the box to see what the pH is. This is going to be something kind of similar to that. So it's going to be a coarse estimate of whether microcystin is present or not, and then in rough concentrations of how much is present or not. So it's far from anything definitive, and that might be good enough. It might not be, depending on how we decide to go with this in the future. But typically, John kind of alluded to this, blue-green algae are always present.
Like E. coli?
Like E. coli, it's always present. And so we want to reiterate that it's only a problem if there's a bloom. And then, even if there is a bloom of blue-green algae, there's no guarantee that it's going to be a toxic species. So I think Rick passed out the document there. In that document, you can read that only 50 species of blue-green algae out of 1,500 produce some kind of cyanotoxin. So we do have microcystis present in our water bodies, but usually they're in abysmally low concentrations. So it's unlikely that that would be the particular species of blue-green algae that would bloom and become toxic. There are other species that are in a more competitive position, and if we did have a blue-green algae bloom, it would probably be a non-toxic species.
So there have been various news articles that have come out and concern over the water being warmer, especially in the summer months and so on. And some stories of, one woman lost 3 of her dogs, and there was nothing. Microphone. And there was nothing visible in the water. It was perfectly clear, and her dogs were dead. And so I've had questions from other dog owners, and that's why I'm bringing this up, so that we can either put people's minds at ease or do something if we're not already doing something.
And so I guess I'm not really familiar with that particular lady's situation. Were tests done that it was definitive that some kind of cyanotoxin was responsible for her dog's death?
I don't know the answer to that. And
so
it was not here. It was
Sure. So I guess my caution with that is that a lot of animals are going to get sick for various reasons in the environment, and it's not necessarily going to be the thing in vogue, right? So right now everybody's worried about harmful algal blooms because it's in the news. And so just because some animals get sick doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be a harmful algal bloom that has caused that sickness. I heard an anecdotal story from someone that he talked to a dog owner, and one of the 2 dogs swam in the lake. One got sick. Then a little time later, they both swam in the lake, and one dog got sick. So when it comes to situations like that, when that's not widespread, and potentially if you have multiple dogs and only one is sick, I would really question whether it is something that particular dog is doing, like maybe drinking from infected water or something like that. There could be a variety of other environmental factors at play that could cause animal sickness, and it's not necessarily going to be in the lake or a harmful algal bloom.
The reason I brought it up in the first place is just like boat recreation, there are a lot of people who have dogs that they like to bring to the lake. And it sounds like it's on your radar and that you're doing what you feel you need to do at this point.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. And
right.
Just to be aware that the visibility of this, whether it's legitimate or not, you just need to be aware of it so that it can be addressed if needed.
Yeah, just to clarify, so whenever you do have a bloom, usually there's going to be some sort of nutrient component to it, and that really lends itself to an extreme amount of productivity.
Right.
Our lakes vary, more often than not, they tend towards kind of a middle road of the productivity scale. So we usually don't worry about it on that scale. The other side of it is you guys take one of the constituents that would kind of tip us off that there was a problem. You take our Sept depths for us, and that is our major indicator. It lets us know whenever there's something going on. Whenever the lake is, and we're talking about very extreme situations that we don't see hardly ever, where there isn't another explanation for, but we're talking about, less than half a meter of Sept depth. And even then, like Chris said, you might not have a problem. There could be other factors at play. But it becomes, to anybody that's kind of trained, once you see it, it becomes pretty obvious this might be the problem you're looking at, and then you can start, down the road. Unfortunately, the way the science goes right now is it's very reactive. We have times that we're highly suspicious that this could be a possibility for us. Of course, for us, it's we've just never had this issue. Our nutrients stay low enough. It's not an issue for us, but we're always aware of the certain times of the year whenever this sort of thing could possibly happen to us.
Yeah. And kind of to tack on about the nutrients and stuff, the whole shtick with blue-green algae is that they can fix nitrogen on their own. So the fact that we fertilize and add nitrogen helps give a more competitive advantage to green algae over the blue-green algae. So
That's a good thing.
By us doing the Sept program and putting nutrients into the lake, we're actually helping allay that a little bit. While, yes, there are more nutrients, they're not in the right balance for blue-green algae to be effective.
Okay. Any other comments?
I got a question on a different, on a Sept disc subject. Can the group discontinue measuring the end of this month?
That's correct. At the end of September, that will be the last.
Okay,
the last.
so I'll put that out to them and let them know. And Chris, do you want the gear back? Do you care?
We've not taken it back the last 3 years.
Okay.
So I think people can keep up with it on their own well enough, unless they just want to bring it to the lab. And I offered that the last 2 years, and nobody ever took on it. They just decided to keep the gear. So.
Unless they're for sure not going to be a part of the program next year.
Okay. So you closed the marina on Monday, so I had to take it home with me.
Paul, do you have something else?
Well, I just wanted to say that we appreciate all of the recreational boat folks that came to express their viewpoints, their concerns about restricting recreational boating on our lakes. Again, they're small lakes, and the community is growing, and there is a limit to the number of particularly large recreational boats that we can, in my opinion, accommodate on our small lakes.
Our next meeting will be on October the 9th. That will be adjourned.